I will now call to order the, the July 5th, 2023 regular school meeting of the Stanwood-Camano School Board of Directors. Looks like all of the directors are present and accounted for, so that's awesome. Today we are offering 2 opportunities for the public to speak. Comments specific to the consent agenda will be allowed prior to the vote on those items. Citizens who submitted a request to speak either here in person or online during the public comment section of the agenda will be called upon to make their comments at that time, which is near the end of the meeting. Please stand with me for the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, you have before you the agenda for the July 5th regular school board meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda? No. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as written? Second. It has been moved by Director Schreiber and seconded by Director Haglund. All in favor of approving the agenda for July 5th, say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Next up, we have the minutes for the June 20th, 2023 regular school board meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? No? Okay. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from June 20th, 2023?
So moved. Second.
Has been moved by Director Murray and seconded by Director Haglund. All in favor of approving the minutes from June 6th regular school board meeting, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously as well. We're now going to move on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Ovenall is filling in for Dr. Rumbach today, so I will hand it over to his capable care.
Thank you, Director Evans. First item on the superintendent's report is the acknowledgement of donations, with 5 donations today that support staff and students in the district. First one is $150 from the Snoqualmie tribe to cover the transportation costs for Utslade Elementary students to attend the outdoor education field trip to Warm Beach Camp on June 1st and 2nd, 2023. Second is a donation of $444.67 from the Twin City Elementary PTA to cover the transportation costs for the kindergarten field trip to Kayak Point on May 26, 2023. Next, $929.84 from the Elder Bay Elementary PTA to cover the transportation costs for the field trips to the Heibel Cultural Museum, Camano Island State Park, and Camp Orkila during the 2022-2023 school year. Fourth is a donation for $1,108.19 from Utslade Booster Club to cover the transportation costs for the field trips to Spark Museum, Warm Beach Camp, and the Camano Island Schoolhouse during the 2022-2023 school year. And last is a donation of $2,311 from the Healing Fund in support of Stanwood High School's choir club. Thank you to the community for those donations. Next on the superintendent's report is the 2023-2024 budget development update from Ruth Boyd.
Good afternoon. Okay, I think this is the first time I do this one, so hopefully it'll. All right, so our budget development process is going well. I wanted to highlight our promise. All students empowered to learn in an inclusive setting and prepared for the future of our choice. And then our 4 pillars also surround just everything that we do on the budget side. We support teaching and learning, engaging our partners, developing our capabilities, and leading with data. The school district budget cycle is before you, and we are actually at the bottom circle, spring and summer, where we prepared a draft budget by incorporating the reductions that we spoke about in the spring, as well as additional cost increases and changes made during the legislative session. And then in August, you will see a final budget to be approved by the school board. And it will set our expenditure capacity for each fund. The budget adoption process includes these RCWs that you see here. We need to make the draft budget available to the public by July 10th. We will again hold a hearing and adoption, and then we'll prepare the OSPI state F-195, which actually you have a draft of the summary pages attached to your agenda. Today is our budget development update, and we'll do some advertising of our hearing and adoption on the 8th and the 15th, and then the 22nd is our budget hearing and adoption. We have 5 budgeted funds. The first and the most, the one that we think most about is our operating budget or general fund. And we'll go through enrollment, some revenue and expenditure details, as well as a summary of our fund balance. Enrollment, we have budgeted about 4,740 students. That does include Running Start and Open Doors. And that it compares to our estimated actual for 22-23 of 4,705. That's estimated because we do some revisions here and there depending on what happens. You know, at the end of June, we sometimes do some revisions for other months, and so you'll see a final at the adoption. And that's about 35 over estimated actual for this current year. That reflects a 29 increase in elementary. That's the most increase at the levels. We did anticipate a higher increase. However, because kindergarten came in lower this year, we reduced that a bit compared to what the demographer had put together for us for fall of 2023. He actually had a higher enrollment, and we went ahead and backed that off a little bit closer to his low projection because not knowing where kindergarten is going to come in. And then for our draft budgeted revenues, you'll see that bold column there. That is the 23-24 draft budget. It includes the different areas of our revenues, including local, state, federal, and other sources. You'll see that local taxes is increasing thanks to our community support. Local non-tax as well as increasing, and that's at a higher rate due to meal increases, as well as investment increases, interest earnings, because those have been going on our local non-tax also. We expect that to increase next year. State general purpose is our state apportionment. So that's our basic education allocation. And that also includes a portion for special education. Every special education student is a basic ed student first. And so a portion of our state apportionment goes towards special education as well. And that increases, you'll notice that it's only 2.2%. And that is because we had an IPD flow through of 3.7% on our salaries and benefits. However, we had a reduction in regionalization, and I believe I've spoken with you about this before. 1.5% of our salaries are reduced this year, and another 1.5% of our salary revenues are reduced next year for regionalization. They did a reanalysis of regionalization, and we did end up being lower in our area. So that was, we are at a 12% regionalization district now, not a 15% regionalization district. The other reason why state general purpose is a bit lower on the percentage side is because retirement rates went down. And so we receive less money. When retirement rates go down, we pay out less, but we also receive less from the state. State special purpose revenues, that includes things such as transportation and special education, state special education funding. It reflects an increase in special education revenues, enrollment. It includes the IPD for those programs. It includes transportation. And then federal general purpose, that is something that we just get from state forests or federal forests. And it's something that we historically get, we just haven't budgeted it because it's small. And so I went ahead and budgeted it for this year, next year. Federal special purpose revenues are your title grants, as well as federal special education. And you'll notice the decrease there, that's related to ESSER reduction. So we haven't used all of our ESSER funds. We have some revenue budgeted there for ESSER, and but it is greatly reduced from the prior year, as well as we will don't expect to have a learn to return funds, which are also federal. Now, what's offsetting that a little bit is the way that the state is changing our TK program, our transitional kindergarten program. It's called TTK now. And that is being funded with federal dollars. They repurposed some ESSER dollars at the state level, and they're funding TTK next year with federal dollars. And then we anticipate future years to be funded with state dollars. This is one way. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to summarize our expenditures. And this is a summarized version of kind of how we, the type of revenues that we receive, or the type of expenditures that we spend, and it's sorted by kind of the primary source. And so basic education is your apportionment funded, as well as some levy. So levy is filtered throughout here because it helps support many of the areas in which we spend our funds. And then we have career and technical education, which also is considered basic education, but it is categorical in terms of we need to spend those revenues on that program. And so I like to split that out just so that we can be sure to know that that is specific to career and technical. Same with special education. State, we need to spend those funds on special education. And in fact, we actually spend more than we receive from the state. And then we also receive special education federal funds, and this is the spending of those. And categorical are on the state side are things like LAP and transportation. And then the federal categorical are things like title, spending, and ESSER. And you'll notice that decrease again, it kind of mirrors the revenue decrease because of ESSER and learn to return reductions. Our spending also came down. Or if the spending is still there, it moved to another area such as basic education. And then we have some other programs as well. Another way to look at expenditures in the budget is by object, which is kind of what we spend our money on. And the broad categories here are certificated salaries and classified salaries. You'll notice that those did increase, but not by as much as they would have had we not gone through our reduced educational plan. And so that is reflected in here, as well as the IPD and other cost increases related to salaries. And then for employee benefits and payroll taxes, you'll notice that large decrease. And again, that's related to retirement rates going down, as well as our IPD and offsetting of the reduced educational plan reductions. Supplies and materials increased somewhat, not as much as we may have thought with an ELA adoption, which is included in here. K8 ELA adoption is included on that supplies line. that is less than what the cost of that would be because of the reductions that we made. Purchase services increased just slightly. There were cost increases, especially in the utilities area. But again, that was offset by our reductions. And then travel and capital outlay are, there were some reductions there as well. This is a summary of our fund balance. So it takes that estimated beginning fund balance. It adds the revenue, subtracts the expenditures that we just went through. And we are out of balance for next year's budget by about $1.5 million. And we did that consciously because we wanted to be able to use fund balance. We knew that the beginning fund balance was going to be a bit higher, and we wanted to be able to soften some of the reductions that we made. And so we are dipping into fund balance a bit next year. And then ending fund balance is expected to be at about 7 million. You'll see the fund balance trend there. That does show that increase while during the COVID years when our costs kind of went down, plus we had the pandemic revenues. And then it has been coming down since then as those revenues have run out. We separate our fund balance into different areas, and one of those is unassigned. And that unassigned portion is anticipated to be about 7.3%. So that's good news. We have your board policy states that we need to have at least 5% in that category. And so we are doing well there with the budget. Again, our fund balance includes that unassigned, but it also includes some reserves, and that includes non-spendable items such as inventory and prepaid invoices. And our ELA adoption is in that category. When we open the purchase order, we're setting the fund balance aside to say we're going to spend that at the beginning of next year. And then we restrict grants and other carryovers such as CTE and LAC. That's also a reserve. This school district, Stanwood-Camano, does not have any committed. The board is able to set aside additional funds if they see fit for things such as facility maintenance, economic stabilization, things like that. The board is able to take action, do a resolution, and set some funds aside if they want to. Assigned is a management identified assignment, and are things like school budget carryovers that we want to be able to provide to the schools next year when they haven't spent everything this year. And then again, the unassigned. And as I alluded, the board sets the fund balance minimum, that's at 5%, and that's included in the unassigned fund balance. But we still call it a reserve because we want to be able to keep that aside. So this might be a good time to pause and just reflect on general fund and see if you have any questions on that before I go into the other funds.
I had a question just to clarify the enrollment projection.
Yeah.
Our enrollment's been about 4,600, give or take. And is that because Open Doors and Running Start isn't already included in that number?
Correct.
Okay.
The report that you see includes it at the very bottom, but we focus on the brick and mortar.
Okay.
Just to sort of clarify, is it generally seen as like a best practice to have your budgeted enrollment be as close to what you think your actual enrollment is, but to sort of err on the side of maybe being lower? Is that why we shifted from that medium to that low model?
Yeah, finance people like me like to be conservative. And so we do tend to, if we think there's an anomaly, such as what happened with kindergarten, we tend to assume that that could happen again. And so that's why we went more with the low.
Okay, because I mean, ultimately, right, like the state trues it up at some point where they start, so they pay us for the difference between our budgeted and whatever. And I'm guessing if we had over projected, we would owe them Or they would like take it out, like they would pay us less, right, to true that up, so that truly goes both ways, where they pay us the extra, or they pay us less than they already paid us.
Absolutely, and what you're remembering is that from September through December, they give us what we budget.
Yeah,
So they're gonna continue to give us apportionment based on the $4,740 students until January, when they true it up, just like you said. And they will either give us less or they'll give us more, depending on whether we hit that mark or not.
okay, perfect. And then one more, how often do they revisit those regionalization rates? You said we went from 15 to 12, like, do they revisit that number every 3 years, 5 years?
I believe it was 4. Or it might have been 6, whenever it was McCleary, during the McCleary. So
Okay.
18, yeah. 5 or 6.
Okay,
And then I believe the next ones are every 4 years.
okay.
And then my question about regionalization is, do you know what areas that reflected negatively and drop that number for our area?
Mhm. Many of the districts north of us were already at the 12% regionalization, so we are more in line with districts north of us. Districts south of us, it's kind of a mixture. So like Arlington, they also came down to 12%. However, this year they did get the 4% increase on their certificated staff salaries for not regionalization, but increase in their mixed factor. Yeah, kind of the mixed factor, the number, their years of experience and so on. So they actually got a little bit more, even though their regionalization modeled the 12% like ours. And then even south of Arlington, they're at, 18%. So we are about 6% lower than some of the south I-5 corridor.
And then the other question I had was in regards to, you were talking about the reflection of ESSER dollars and the decrease of those. Can you talk a little bit about the uptick in the special education dollars that increase for our area?
Are we talking revenues or expenditures or both? And so the revenues are part of the state special purpose there. And that includes an increase in special education, and that reflects some enrollment increase. So remember, this is budget to budget. So we had anticipated enrollment being lower than it actually came in for special education. And so we're kind of catching up to that on both the revenues and the expenditure side for special education. And so that is why both sides have increased.
I was wondering also about where the new work that was done in the legislation, or like this last.
It's reflected in that state special purpose.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Those the revenues for the additional funding that came through for special education is reflected there. And then if we had increased expenditures, which we did here, those are reflected on the expenditure side. But there wasn't a requirement to spend those funds. They were allocating funds based on the need of school districts already putting into the special education program those dollars. And so while we did increase in our special education expenditures, it wasn't tied to the revenues specifically.
Okay.
All right, shall we move on to other funds? ASB, our draft budget has revenues of $732,000 and the students' expenditures of $823,000. Each of our ASBs put together a budget, and this is a combination of all of those budgets put together. It includes student fundraising and spending for general ASB, athletics, classes, clubs, and then private monies, which are actually not it's basically a flow through. So if students decide that they want to fundraise for a 501c3 organization, charitable organization, then they can bring in those monies and then it flows back out to those organizations. And that's what private monies is. It's not considered public funds, whereas all of the other ASB funds are considered public funds. And then our ending fund balance is expected to be about $350,000 in ASB at the end of next year. For debt service, we receive revenues from tax receipts to support the payments of principal and interest on our 2 outstanding bonds. That is about $11 million for revenues and expenditures. And then we anticipate an ending fund balance of about $4.5 million. And the reason for that level of fund balance is so that we're prepared when the next payment comes along in December. Capital Projects Fund, we anticipate to have about $6 million rolling forward into next year with revenues of about $550,000. That's much less than what we are used to in our budget due to the levy failure from 2022. But we do have those funds carried forward, and so we are putting in capacities to do some projects of about $5.5 million. And then for Transportation Vehicle Fund, this is our smallest fund. We do expect to anticipate to have $1.6 million roll forward. Generally, that is higher than normal. And the reason is because there is such a backlog of on orders of buses. And so we don't anticipate our next series of buses to come in until December. So that fund balance does roll forward. We will receive some revenues for depreciation, although they come in at the end of the year. And then the expenditures of $1.5 million. That's capacity to pay for the buses that are coming in December, as well as some if they happen to, get going on building those buses and they get them delivered. We have the capacity to go ahead and pay for them earlier. I don't anticipate that they all will come in though next fiscal year. Other funds. Happy to answer any other questions.
How many buses do we currently have on order that we're waiting for?
I believe we have six or seven.
And the transportation vehicle fund can only spend on actual yellow buses, correct?
Correct.
So if we need a
A
car,
van or.
a van, how does that?
That needs to be paid for out of general fund.
That includes all the maintenance and fuel and all of that as well. It's just literally the yellow buses, like the purchase of them.
The purchase of them and, if we get options as we're purchasing them, then we can pay for those as well. Yeah, and the idea is that the depreciation process that the state has is that you're able to replenish those as long as you stay up on your recycling or your surplus schedule, you should be able to pretty much keep up with purchasing new buses as the other ones phase off of the depreciation schedule.
I know this is basically, that we're talking budget, but I was just curious, has there been discussion about the transitioning into buses in some of our other districts that have done?
We briefly spoken about that, and we actually did have a company want to give us a proposal on that, and they didn't get back to us, which leads me to believe that at this time it wasn't very cost effective in order to do that, but I can certainly follow up with them and find out what
I was just wondering if there was anything that you were doing budgetarily down the road for any of that transition.
Down the road, you need to be able to have the funds up front in order to pay for the much higher cost of an electric vehicle. And so if that was something that the board wanted to move forward with, then we would need to have a replacement plan to be able to upfront fund those first. And then eventually it would get paid back through the depreciation process, but it's that initial outlay that's really difficult for districts unless they can fund grants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Ruth.
you.
Next item on the superintendent's report is the K-8 literacy curriculum adoption by Dr. Guyan and Dr. Ryan.
Took off like the clicker. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Ms. Obenell. Real quick, before I hand this over to Dr. Ryan and Ms. Pappas, I just wanted to anchor our work with Thomas, especially with work of a literacy adoption, particularly in the area of empowered to learn. And then coupling that with the pillars, when you look at all four, really the teaching and learning component is what sticks out the most. And so before I hand it over to Dr. Ryan and his team, just really want to just give them a thank you. It's one of the biggest decisions the district will make is a recommendation of literacy, especially the scope and the amount of students we're touching here. So I want to quickly thank Dr. Ryan and his team and send us off his way. And here's the clicker. Thanks, Dr. Guyan. And a member of the team is here. This is Ms. Pappas, fourth grade teacher from Cedar Home. And like Ben said, this group really leaned into the work all year. So I'll talk a bit about that in just a second. We think this is a great slide for what's what comes with the K literacy adoption. There's been a ton of great work in the district in the last 9 or 10 years around resources for literacy. And because they're a bit older, there's been some supplementing, and as people supplement, we can kind of grow and go in different directions. That can be in a grade band team, that can be in a school, and it can be different among schools. So a K-8 adoption, we can confidently say that our kindergarten through 8th grade kids are going to get a common grade level literacy, reading and writing experience every day. And that alignment piece actually enhances the collaboration among the teachers to support any annual action plan goals around reading, writing, and literacy. And this is the group, the adoption team, that they started meeting in the middle of October and literally met second to last week of school in June. So involved, we have general education teachers, title lab teachers, technology teachers, TOSAs, teachers teaching special education services, principals, and some central office staff. But I won't read all the names, but those are the folks that worked all year on that. And they came after full workday, ready to work more. It wasn't like, oh gosh, more work. It was more like excitement to get into what we're going to get into. Then at the beginning of April, we widened our team and folks volunteered to pilot materials. So the adoption team started with about 6 different providers or curriculum each and winnowed down, and we got down to 2 each. And these are folks that volunteered to pilot starting in April. And adoption team members on the previous slide also piloted as well. This is just a kind of a slide that illustrates some quantifiable data around all the meeting and the work. 23 certificated teachers on the adopting team, 39 teachers that piloted, so 41 teachers that touched this process in one way or another, and between 40 to 45 hours of collaboration, whether that's looking at rubrics, looking at resources, hearing presentations, like that. I'm going to walk through, this is an attempt to kind of visualize the year, and then we'd love to get Kristen to talk about her experience as a teacher later in the process. At the beginning, the adoption teams met together. We had 2 meetings together, and as a K-8 group, we looked at norms. We also looked at the promise and our 4-page strategic plan document as backdrops to guide the work, to set the stage. Along with that, we started to kind of think about and look at rubrics that led into the next month in November. The elementary team landed on a reading league rubric, and then the middle school team started backing up. After 2 meetings, we met separately, and then each group had their own rubric. So elementary reading league rubric, which is geared towards science of reading. And then the middle school team had from Achieve the Core. It's a rubric that is the backdrop of the Common Core standards. And then we started to nail down samples and really get into the samples. And it was kind of fun to watch the teams. If you can visualize a kindergarten classroom, how kindergartners, after they get some instruction, they might be working on the floor. And first grade classroom as well, but our teachers were doing that too. So we'd get samples and there'd be stuff everywhere. And kindergarten teachers would be right over here with things laid out, looking at it on the floor, like we want our kids to experience those materials in the first grade. Fun to watch, really rewarding to watch. And then we started our provider presentations in December, and those pretty much went through up until May. In that meantime, getting the presentations and looking at samples, that kind of helped the adoption team narrow down who we wanted to pilot with. You can't pilot with everybody, and nor is that even a feasible or good idea. And then we got to June, we extended the pilot timeline. We wanted to be done a month sooner, but we didn't. We started piloting in spring, and we thought, or rather wait for teachers to get more experience was a better idea. And then both teams in June were ready to make recommendations. Kristen, did you want to say a couple things about your teacher and leader experience in the process?
Yeah, I would say one, point, the overall big picture was that we adopted journeys after the Common Core standards had come out. And so they were backtracking from the get-go, trying to make that curriculum meet the standards. And so we realized we did really need to kind of catch the team up on what is the research that's out there and how kids learn to read. And then my school had done, book study, other schools had done book studies about the English language and breaking it down, but not all of us had. So we all had to kind of come to a common understanding of what we knew that was out there and how to gauge these programs and what we're looking for. So yes, the Common Core standards need to drive it, as well as what research is saying about reading. And so I think that work was bigger than any of us anticipated, jumping into it and kind of made it more involved process.
Yeah, well put. And as you were talking, these are some reasons why the adoption team moved Amplify forward as the adopted course of study. I'll talk about the two that are in highlight, and then would love for you to throw in why you kind of favored Amplify as well, Kristen. But Amplify has what are called decodables for kids that are in kindergarten through second grade. A huge part of that program is the decodables do two things. They really help hone in on scientific research about how kids learn to read, that language comprehension piece. The decodables are a huge part of that. And alongside that, Amplify is careful to say we have to help kids to learn to read, but we also have to have the comprehension piece. And the decodables do both. And they're really connected to the strategic plan of the promise, and that all kids are going to get these opportunities to get access to these decodables. The curriculum focuses on social studies and science as areas of reading, which is kind of powerful in a sense that kids get used to reading informational text in a science format. So when they get to high school, maybe the science textbook isn't so daunting, isn't so, my son has a reaction to his science textbook, but same with social studies, being able to have that non-informational reading experience. And it's rigorous, it's above what we've been getting, what we've been doing, but I'd love to hear why you opted for and Amplify as a course of study.
I brought the program guide. I don't know if you were able to the open house, but I'll read that with the board. This was and that's the highlights.
Can I ask you just to talk into the microphone?
Yes.
So then it catches you on the left hand side.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was able to pilot both programs as Dr. Ryan said, and I did about 3 weeks, probably both. That gave me the opportunity to go through a full unit of HMH and a full unit of Amplify. And interestingly enough, my teammate had picked the Amplify one unit, but they were both about inventors and inventions. So I had the same topic of study to be able to compare texts and how the presentation was done to students. And both had really good core components. But what was interesting was, by the third week of HMH, we were all pretty bored. It was the same format, the same rollout each week, the same way of answering questions and what was expected at the end, and then start over, and then start over. Amplify's unit, the kids were in groups, they had to do projects together, and they had other Common Core standards involved as far as collaborating, speaking, listening skills that otherwise is kind of resting on the teacher to make sure to address, but not built in to a program. The kids loved it. They were really engaged. They were able to wholeheartedly say that they preferred one program to the other, as well as myself. You know, I can't always go by what kids think is fun, but this was engaging. The students were able to do many opportunities to write about their inventor or inventions in different modes. And so it really addressed the learning standards, but in a more engaging way. The other thing that really striking about Amplify is that it was built from the ground up on research versus HMH, just like we saw with Journeys, they're trying to kind of backtrack and add and redo. And these big curriculum companies only have to redo a certain percent to call it a next edition. And I think we can keep seeing traces of that. So that's, I think, why I definitely thought Amplify was a stronger choice. For me as a teacher, I taught fourth grade, so I saw it through my lens. As a team, we talked about, though, everybody's lenses and how they saw it at first grade or a reading specialist lens. And we're able to have those good discussions on what it should look like at each grade. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we couldn't get anybody from the middle school team, so I will do my very best to represent that voice. The middle school team wanted to move toward HMH into literature for the and these bullets are literally copy and pasted from documents that the adoption teams made comments on. More or less, the middle school team piloted HMH and Savas and thought that the depth of the reading and the opportunities to read in HMH were richer than Savas, along with the assessments that went with them. So like Kristen was saying about the elementary experience, the middle school team had that experience with HMH where it's depth and breadth. They were able to go in both. And with the other provider, they were finding out they had to supplement the assessments to make it more rigorous. And then the texts were also very engaging. So where we're at with next steps is logistics, planning, professional development, that implementation piece, which is big and important. And part of that implementation piece is what types of supports are going to be in place and how we monitor that through support and through expectation and things of that nature. Then, Dr., are you going to come up and this is mine? Specifically with logistics, we are going to be looking at previous curriculum. Just so when we're implementing, we're using the newly adopted courses of study. And then we're preparing for Amplify and HMH into literature in terms of preparing, meaning we're ordering materials, looking at timelines with providers. Obviously, thinking about this school year and how we're going to get professional development in place that's strong for teachers, because we know that when we support our teachers, we're there to support our kids. What's good for our teachers, are going to be good for our kids. And then what the expectation for delivery is from one provider to get materials from a warehouse, from a print house to here. Now that's you, Ben.
Thank you. All right. But thinking about professional development, which I was talking about this with Collins, like the race to the middle race, handing off the baton, and here's the next leg of the race. But as we think about the upcoming school year, we looked at this in three buckets, if you will. what's happening for the start of the school year, what will happen during the school year, and then afterwards. So let's just start with the, before the school year begins. We wanted to ensure that our teachers wouldn't just be coming in and like, oh my gosh, the curriculum's here and I haven't touched it. So within both of our providers, HMH and Amplify, there will be an opportunity for our teachers to go ahead and go into an opportunity, an induction, if you will, with the provider. Giving them an option to choose. We understand that it's August, some folks might be on vacation. But giving them an opportunity to do that. The really reality of it is we use middle school as an example. A lot of our middle school teachers piloted and actually had access to Solvis and were able to go ahead and start playing with the curriculum, getting into it. So it won't be too unfamiliar, except we also know that we know that teachers move throughout the year and some to be new in the position. So an opportunity in August to go ahead and start working with the provider. The other one is the August 31st day. And the thinking here, this is a little bit of a change, and this has gotten clearer with us as Colin and I have talked to two providers, is that we want to provide a half-day training for, and this one would be all of our teachers at K-5 and our ELA teachers at the middle school. So they'll have that half day with the provider. There's something, I think logistically that we'll have to figure out, but the whole idea is to give them an opportunity to get in there, hands-on curriculum on site and grade level specific on that day, or actually maybe grade bands. And then also during that time in August, we also want to give them and recognize the time that they're going to do some optional planning on their own, that we would go ahead and pay them for that time. So this is the start up to the school year. As the school year starts, we actually feel that this is a pretty robust model. We say this in one of our conversations with the providers and actually locals who have just adopted new curriculum. What we're thinking about at the elementary is having a monthly professional development. And the thing right now would be a release, it'll push the system in terms of substitutes, where a team of substitutes would go and release bands of teachers. And then they would actually have content specific professional development. So in a day, you might see a team of teachers, K1 get PD for, let's just say 2 hours, 2 to 3 get PD for 2 hours, and then 4 or 5 for 2 hours. That would be elementary across all 5 schools. And then with the provider there, we would also pay for optional planning time with the provider there. If they wanted some more specific, get one-on-one time with the provider, and plan time. We see that happening once a month. I'll also get down to this K. There'll also be opportunities, still be working out with the provider around virtual supports, if that's something that they could use throughout the year or month as well. At the middle school, a little different. We actually are setting up an opportunity once a month to release all ELA teachers at Stanwood Middle and Fort Susan Middle, where they would go ahead and work with HMH and have that as an ELA team. And again, I would say once a month, but they roughly come up between either 7 or 8 days, depending on how the calendar looks. What we like in both of these models are 2 things: there's a regular touch, and there's a routine in there. There's also an opportunity for cross collaboration. So what an opportunity for our middle school team to work together, not just be the Fort Susan team and you know the Stanwood middle school team. So an opportunity to collaborate together. And as we get toward the end of the year, one of the things that we have to think about is, what about new teachers coming in? How do we build on capacity? We've got some coaches in our district who could also help us be our own, I think, homegrown professional developers and provide things like that. So how it looks like post year 1 is something that we're going to still work on. We have a relationship built for 3 years, in which we'll continue this, but we also know it's about the sustainability of professional development. I think this is next on you. I think it's that. Okay. The other piece is monitoring. Some of the monitoring is also something that we discussed. One thing I know, talking to Dr. Rumbaz and her principal one-on-one time, one of the things that she wants to do is make sure she is seeing literacy in the classroom. easy enough at the middle school, at the elementary, might be with blocks and teachers are doing literacy, so she can go ahead and see how that's looking, how it's being implemented across the system. The other one, and this is a monthly training that I'm talking about it for principals, and that would involve K-5 principals, Dr. Ryan and myself, in which we as a group of administrators to go ahead and see what are we learning about the curriculum? What are you seeing? What are the things that you're puzzled over? What sort of things that, we could see like an administrator saying, wow, they've really done really well in implementing something here. Another one might have struggles. So it's an opportunity for them to just collaborate together as leaders. And we would see that also happening with Stanwood Middle and Fort Susan. And the other one is our own, our teaching learning, just going out there and seeing both literacy options in person. How can we support the system as a whole? And what are we seeing from our lens? So there are multiple touches that we see and really wanting to make sure we implement this right and well. And really the fidelity to that work and really how we learn from it. It's like I said, an important, incredible investment. We want to make sure we're doing right and well.
Did the team take into account, looking at the curriculum sort of through a lens of equity? Is the curriculum portraying pictures of individuals with different races and cultures and abilities so that kids can identify with that?
So we built a separate document outside of the rubrics, because rubrics don't always address those pieces that you just put forward. So we created a list of lenses, what's what we call them. And one of the lenses, as an example, could be how do the core resources, how do these literacy resources support a student that might be receiving special education services in reading and writing? And how can the provider account for that? How can those resources support the teacher to make that a tangible learning experience for that student that needs access to grade level content like anybody else? So that's, we made that list of lenses in conjunction with the rubrics. The rubrics keep at the grade level. But I think the lenses, because we had the foundation of the strategic plan and the promise, that was very equity driven. So kind of had that side by side, the rubrics and our lenses of what we were looking for.
I think the other one I would add was probably that it's just aligned to the standards. Where the other ones that I think is Pat said, we have not done this shortly before or after Common Core was adopted. So this was definitely one of the things that the standards are that are within the curriculum are standards that we expect of our students from the Common Core state standards.
Have we talked about or thought about bringing the original groups back that originally piloted down the road like 3 months, and as they're already implementing all of this to see what they're seeing in the implementation process?
I think that's a great idea, to keep in close touch with folks that went through the piloting process, what's going well, and get specific and enhance even more on that piece, as well as lessons learned, because it's going to be the first year. We have to give ourselves space and grace to kind of go slow to go fast. Might not be the best way to put it, but where there might be something they're wondering about, which is where I think the professional learning plan could also support that. So it could be in real time. And if it were the pilot teachers, they would have time with the provider there, saying, hey, we're having troubles with our resources in terms of giving access to kids that are learning English as a second language, as an example. But I think tracking and having specific conversations with folks that piloted is a great idea.
I think the one thing I would add on that one, Director Murray, is first we would want to see something like that, especially at the end of the year. And my thinking on that would be that I have a true core conviction that that we don't want to be in a place where we want to augment the curriculum in week 6. I think we want to be able to sit down and say, what can we learn the way the curriculum is right now? And if there's any changes that they might have a recommended calendar and how quick it could be or should be. But what I truly also believe is that as we get smarter about this work, and think of it as a high school teacher, my poor kids at period 1, period 2 and 3, I had a better lesson, just because I understand, and navigate my resources. I got better about it. And I do think that in year 1, there'll be a lot of things that are going to be new for our teachers. But I also have a whole lot of confidence that the more that we get into this, that they will, really, I think, just be incredible, users and practitioners of either curriculum, 8 and 8 or F5.
I'm just wondering about the time where we're talking about doing the PD for a couple of hours, whether having that as its own piece versus, as we were just talking about, bringing the groups back together. Just because 2 hours is not a lot of time, if there's a big issue that the teachers are having, we want to make sure that they have that time to work, properly work through that. So making sure that we're making space for actual communication and finding out how our teachers are dealing with, the curriculum and making sure that we're not missing gaps. And I think whole entire school year might be a little too long and waiting to find out where those gaps might be. So being cognizant of that would be appreciated.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, so on the elementary adoption, it said 70% of the team voted in favor. The other 30%, were they like all for one other thing, or was that 30% kind of split against, like in some of the other ones? Was it like 70 to 30, or was it like 70, 10, 10, 5 or whatever?
So it's a little bit, the number's a little higher, just a touch above 70%.
Okay,
And in terms of numbers of folks in the adoption team room, it would have been, right around like 19 would have been in favor of Amplify, and 6 would have been in favor of HMH. But in saying that, I think there's also opportunity to tap into that percentage, because it's, 30% or just a touch below things that, like Director Murray was saying, if there were gaps they might have had during the pilot, so we can make that part of the planning process. One thing that the providers have both said, we can tune this to, we're going to support an implementation, but we can also tune it toward what a school is going to need. So we want to make sure to tap the shoulders of folks that didn't have the rich experience that Ms. Pappas had, and then make that a key part of the planning process.
awesome.
And we have a plan in place, so in case we're not able to get all the curriculum, are we gonna still be able to roll it out at the beginning of the year? Just with there being such a short timeline in order to beginning of the school year.
We do, we have a plan A is that we order, things get here and everything's great. There's no UPS.
Something of lollipops.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. There's no UPS strike or anything of that nature. But I mean, if something unforeseen happened, we,
Like a shooting strike.
yeah, we could, I could see a situation where we don't have materials. They're gonna have the materials digitally. So a plan B could be folks here could make copies, for folks to have something to hold in their hands. At least to get started while the materials are getting here. And then a plan C, if that fell because technology isn't working or whatever, the emergency plan would be, we still have the old materials in the room, we maybe open with that and wait for materials to arrive, and then we could segue, amplify in elementary rooms and into literature and 6, 7, 8.
Thank you to the teaching and learning team and the 40+ teachers and staff members that were part of the process. It's an arduous process, so thank you for that. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Ryan. We will now move on to the consent agenda. Anyone in attendance may speak to the items contained in the consent agenda at this time. If you're attending on the Zoom platform, we use the Zoom raise hand feature so we can invite you to speak. Are there any board members that wish to pull any item of the consent agenda for discussion? No. All right, anybody in the audience here, have, any comments or anything to add? All right, I don't see anybody in here and there are no raised hands online. Okay. No, okay. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 11? Second, moved by Director Shriver, seconded by Director Murray. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Next up is public comment. I believe we do not have any public comment. All right, super. Next up is school board discussion. We also don't have anything there, so we're really cooking through this meeting here. Items brought up by the board members. Director Hagman.
I just wanted to thank everybody for a great meeting. I don't really have anything to add.
Thank you. Director Baker.
I'm excited about the new curriculum. It's a lot of work to get to that point, so definitely thanks for that. And I'm gonna miss Bruce's budget reports. I've never thought of this budget report. I'm always happy to hear from you.
You can always watch.
Yeah, always, I'm she's gonna be here.
The other room.
I'm just grateful for our deputy superintendent being here and having our meeting today. Thank you. Congratulations. Grateful always to the donations there from the tribe and how important outdoor education is for our kids. And large gift from the Healing Fund for our music program. So we're critical, and just the support we get from our PTAs and our booster club and that. And thankful for the agreements with our public school employees. And we can work together to work together with kids and for North County Fire and the agreement there and our partnership with the YMCA and things that we're doing there and together through the curriculum and looking forward to our new hires for the fall.
Good meeting. And I do want to say that I am very grateful for all the work that's been done by teaching and learning and all of our additional staff in regards to this curriculum adoption. I know it's been at times rather tedious, and it is a heavy lift for all of us going into this next school year. I think overall, it sounds like it's going to be a very positive thing. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to having some time away and enjoying sunshine.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone else, for hanging out with us and keeping us on track today. I appreciate you. Just a quick reminder, we only have the one meeting for the board in July, so it's just this one. We'll be back as regularly programmed in August. So no second meeting here in July. And then another quick reminder that our our free lunch program started today at the elementary school, and then Twin City, and then it'll start the end of the month at the high school, right? The 25th, I believe. End of the month, yeah. So make sure that you visit those sites if you're needing some foods this summer. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Is our meeting schedule different in August? Is it the second and fourth? Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, from our meeting.
That's all I have. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.